evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the Historical Society and any other people who I might have missed, but I'm glad you came out tonight to listen to this story. It's a remarkable event that we've all experienced everywhere. I know we have some other first responders in the crowd here, gentlemen you would never think that would be involved in 9/11, but we have a dentist who was the forensic medical doctor for the first recovery, which was, I can't imagine a worse position to be in. But we all helped out where we could, and I appreciate all the help I got from this family, the family in Brightwaters, my own family, and all my friends who I've met over the years. So, what I'm going to do, I don't have a prepared speech. I do have a prepared speech, 16 pages long, but sometimes it can be a little boring. I can get tongue-tied in it, and my eyes aren't as good as I used to be. So I can't even, when I blow it up, I can hardly see it. So I've gone to a presentation that I've done at several colleges, and this is what I'm going to present tonight. It's going to be my story, but it's also going to tell you about some very strange coincidences that happened, people I've met, and helped foster me through this, through my recovery. And I really needed a lot of help, so I appreciate everything I got. So we're going to start out a week before 9/11. This picture was taken over in Oak Island on Labor Day of that year. And it was a beautiful, beautiful day. We had a friend, John DeGarmo, had a home over there on Oak Island, and he invited us. And he said, can I have the two of you, my wife and I, go down to the dock and take a picture? It's a beautiful day. So we took this picture, and when he got it developed, he said, you're not going to believe what I found in the picture I took of you. In the very corner of my shoulders there are the Twin Towers. And he says to me, how far away is that? And I said, I have no idea. It's got to be 25, 30 miles. So I said, you know what? Since we came over on a boat, I said, I have my GPS on the boat. I know the coordinates of the fountain in the middle of Tobin Plaza between the two buildings. Let me go get it off the boat, and we'll plot this out. So we got it over, and lo and behold, it was 37 and a half miles away. We could see those towers gleaming in the sun. If you advance that one, and this is a shot that shows it a little bit better. You can see it a little bit better there. But that's how the week started, and it was a beautiful week like that all the way up to September 11th. And as we got to September 11th, we move ahead. Okay. As we get to September 11th, I remember getting out of the subway at Fulton Avenue on the 456 and walking up the staircase. And as you walk up that staircase, you look right up through the canyon of buildings, and you saw the Twin Towers. The sky was the most immaculate shade of blue you've ever seen. So blue that when they built the memorial 15 years later, they have a whole wall of people's recollections of what the color of the sky was that day. If you go down into the lower floors of the museum at Ground Zero, you will see these squares of different color blues and people's perception of that day. It was like a gorgeous day. Cool, and those two buildings were just gleaming, especially mine. I was in the North Tower. So it took me till about 7:10 in the morning to get to that subway station, and I was at my desk at about 7:15. My objective that day, or that morning, was to go to the post office and get a stamp for my soon-to-be late mortgage payment. And the mortgage payment, the bank was over the top of the plaza and down the other side onto Vesey Street. The staircase and the way that you got there, you ended up going down what soon became the survivor staircase that they have since taken and put in the museum, the whole staircase, two flights of stairs. And I would pick up my stamp and come back to the office. But just as I got out of the lobby at 8:45, I heard this tremendous thud. Now, to me, it sounded like a 18-wheel truck had left its tailgate open and had gone over, hit a pothole or gone over a road plate, so that tailgate swung out and came back with this hollow-sounding boom. Not like an explosion or not like that. And frankly, there were no vibrations. There was nothing to indicate that the building had been hit at all. I looked at the guy at the turnstile where you collect the badges, and he looked at me and said, "What the hell was that?" And I told him what I thought it was, and he said, "Yeah, you could be right." We kind of looked around, and we looked over towards where the elevator control center was, and these guys were all just standing around like nothing ever happened. And if they had been looking at the monitors, they would have seen that all the elevators were now falling into the basement. Just about all but one elevator in the whole North Tower was severed. And people could hear the whining rush of the elevators as they came down, pushing the ignited fuel, the jet fuel, down into the lower floors. But still, other than that noise, which we thought was outside, he said, "I'm going about my business." So I decided to go out. And we have a portico out there, the west side entrance to the North Tower. And you could drive up there. We'll see that picture later. You could drive up in there and get out of the rain, and the taxis would use that to come up. I had pushed my way out through the revolving doors to get outside, and I normally would walk around the north side of the tower, right where the plane came in. Right up below that, there's a staircase there, and that would take me over to the survivors' stairwell into the bank. But when I got outside, everybody who was out there smoking was running, and I had a coworker who was out there, and he yells at me from about 50 yards away, "Ken, look out!" And he points up above my head, and I'm looking up through the glass of the portico, and I see smoke billowing out of the top of the tower. Big, heavy, thick black smoke. No fire, nothing ignited or anything like that. But then I also saw steel and debris coming down. And the split second I had to react to what was going on was to get back into the lobby of the North Tower and let all this debris and steel fall behind me. And I'll deal with that later, what went on later. So I turned around real quick and rushed back into the revolving door. And as I got in the door and started to push the door back into the lobby, all of a sudden, all the oxygen got sucked out of the door. And the door turned black. Something scalded it black. And within a tenth of a second, the temperature went up so high that I gasped for air and bent down, and through my fingers, I could see an orange glow coming at me from what I rightly believe was the center elevator, center where I had just come out of. And within, again, a tenth of a second, I was lying now out in the middle of West Side Highway with a revolving door which weighed about 300 pounds, completely wrapped around me. And totally in shock. I knew I was hurt badly. I didn't know how badly he was hurt. But I had to get out from underneath this this revolving door, and managed to kind of slide out through the partitions. And I looked around, and everything seemed to be going in slow motion. I could see people off in the distance. I could see things burning around me. And I questioned that later on as to what was burning, because there was nothing flammable out in that area that could have been burning. So to this day, I don't have an idea what that was, but some of these questions that I can't even get answered today of what this was. People were helping others who had been burned or injured over on by where the doors were, but I'm now out of the picture. far enough away from anybody to even be forgotten that I was even there. So I got up, I pushed the door off, I got up and I started to walk away. And I wanted to walk down, didn't want to go back in the building, but I wanted to get down to the corner. And as I walked down the street past the Marriott Hotel, which the two buildings were on, there was a restaurant on the corner there. You had the South Tower here and the North Tower here. It goes right along West Side Highway. I was begging people for help, water. I knew that I was severely burned. I knew that one of the first things I did was to rub my hands through my head to see whether or not I had lost any pieces of my skull or anything like that. And when I found out that it's pretty much all intact other than the blood, I kept on walking. I begged people and they said, "You can't have water. You've been burned badly. Can't give you water." And they were so much caught up in the events that were taking place around them that to this day I have no qualms about anybody not doing what I wanted them to do. They had their own things to do. And so I proceeded going down. I sat on the corner between the two buildings. Now it took me 15 minutes to walk that 100 yards or 75 yards to get to that corner. And I sat down on the curb and everybody is screaming. And I said, "What's going on? What's going on?" And I look and people were, off the towers. And I said, if I'm going to get through this day, in my mind, I cannot watch this. And then all of a sudden, everybody started screaming, and I look up and I see that I heard subconsciously heard the sound of the jet flying into the South Tower and exploding. And the heat was so intense that it was burning people's clothes standing around me. So, and the fire went the other way, from away from them, and not so. It was quite a time. So at that particular point in time, some people grabbed me and started bringing me around the side of the building to get me away from any falling debris. And this young lady came up to me with a cell phone and said, "Can I call anybody for you?" And everybody was yelling at her. "There's no cell tower. There's no, the cell towers are all out. The antenna on the North Tower, which transmits all this stuff, is damaged," which wasn't the case yet. But she managed to get out and call my wife, Nadine, who was over at the Bayshore Middle School, in the department over there, and she had just heard that the towers had been hit and was running out to the car when one of her co-workers got that phone call and raced out and got her and brought her back. And the last thing I was able to say to her was that I'm badly burned, but I'm going to make it. And just as I said that, a young man who was sitting in a livery cab named Stephen Newman, I guess we can proceed on this thing. You all know what that picture is. It was a double cover. That's me over at the Jersey City Medical Center with all these orderlies and doctors waiting outside. 4 of us came. Only 4 of us ended up. And that appeared in the People magazine on page 103, and we had no idea that it was me until a young friend of ours who's deaf and reads lips all the time said, "That's Ken's lips." And she was able to identify me, even with my mustache gone. Okay. All right. So we'll start from the beginning here. Here is the North Tower with the antenna on the top. There's the first tower to get hit and the second tower to fall. So at A is where I was blown out, and I walked down to about this point, which is at pretty much the corner. I think I might have even crossed the street. And while I was sitting here at B, was when the South Tower was struck on this side, and all the fire went out the front of the building, but on the side, all the steel and debris again came out at me. It was blowing out at me. And while I was there, those people who were watching the people jump and also the plane hit the building, got me to this point when this young lady put the phone in my face and got hold of Nadine. And at that point, a man who had been sitting in a cab comes up to me and says, "My name is Stephen Newman. My father is a doctor in Huntington. You're going into shock, or you're in shock. You need a hospital right away. I am going to stay with you the entire day to get you to safety. But I do not know the downtown area at all. So my goal is to get you over to where the water taxis and the ferries leave to go over to New Jersey." And from that point on, we started an odyssey of walking here. He didn't want to go up into the area where the towers were hit. He said, "We'll go down south a little bit further here. We'll head over to the Hudson River, and we'll walk up the Hudson River Promenade." And we did that, and we got to D, the spot D, and that's when a fireboat called the John McKean had just pulled into the wall. And I was the first injured person that they had seen, and they all wanted to be as helpful as they could by, trying to clean me up and remove some of the, the scarring and stuff like that, but they only were making it worse with the oxygen mask and everything. So I asked them not to. We asked them, can you take us over to New Jersey? And they said, "No, we're on this spot now. We have to stay here. Would you be," she said, "Okay." Then Steve Newman says to them, "Well, if you can't take us over, we have to keep going." So now Steve starts out, and one of the firemen, the first guy who came to triage me a little bit, grabbed me by the other shoulder, and they more or less walked me and dragged me all the way around. This is called the North Cove. All the way around here, and we get to this spot here, and now we get on a little Cushman cart. And that Cushman cart, the fireman gets on top of the cart and tells all the people, there were thousands of people, and this whole area is just loaded. They said, "We have an injured person here," and they parted like the Red Sea. I mean, literally parted, so that this Cushman cart could take us all the way up to the dock. And we got on the dock, and for some reason they weren't using the ferry terminal, which was right here. The water taxis were actually coming inside of the Cove Marina and butting the front loaders of the water taxis against the thing. They had just pulled out, and as they're pulling out, the South Tower is now falling. The debris is starting to come. We can see it coming up over the tops of the buildings here. And the last water taxi had pulled out, and he saw Steve and I standing on the edge of the dock, and he rammed the boat right back onto the dock again so that I could fall onto the front deck and a couple other people. There were a couple of ladies who fell in at this point in time and ended up, they were on the outside here. They fell in through the rush of people, and they ended up floating down the Hudson River. But I did talk to the fireboat years later, and they told me, "Oh yes, we remember the two of them. We managed to pull them out with the nets, and we draped over the bow of the boat." They said it was not an easy task. They were very large ladies. So let's go ahead. So that's where I got the last boat out of here over to Hoboken, New Jersey. Now, the first time that I had read anything after 9/11 about what happened appeared in this book, The City in the Sky, The Rise and Fall of the World Trade Center. And if you go to the next slide, I was quoted in here, and I probably can't show you where. It talks about some of this. And what happened was, I can't say I was misquoted, I probably said this, but I said that I thought I saw a gaseous mixture in the lobby of the North Tower. And this fostered the most amazing reaction from conspiracy theorists you can imagine. And it was not my intention, it was the way I, at that point in time, had described when You ever take a kerosene lamp and light a kerosene lamp, you know, a hurricane lamp, and turn the wick up too high, and all of a sudden the whole globe on the outside of it turns charcoal, you black and you can't see it? Well, that's what it was to me while I was in the revolving door coming in. The heat that was coming at me from that thing fogged up the door, so when I looked through my fingers and saw the orange glow coming at me, it was, to me, a gaseous mixture. But I described it improperly, and therefore all the conspiracy theorists went crazy. I'm glad. They got to do something, right? All right, you can move on. This gentleman here is my savior, okay? Other than my real savior. But this is Steve Newman. He was a broker at Merrill Lynch, 37 years old, I think, at the time, unmarried. And he's the one that said that you're going into shock, and I'm going to get you to New Jersey on the water taxi or on the ferry over there and get you treated in New Jersey. So Steve and I went on that odyssey of going around, meeting the fireboat, etc. And he went on the ferry with me over to New Jersey. He was with me the whole time until I got triage, where you saw all those people wear that picture of me over on the gurney. Got me over there, and the only person who was allowed to get to me that day, or was able to get to me that day, was my daughter. She attended school in Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, because she didn't have to go over any bridges or structures. She was able to get to my side. And that was probably around, so what happened, I injured at 8:30, 9:15 there. Figure around 11 o'clock I was being triaged at the Jersey City Medical Center. But they couldn't, I had serious burns to my hands, my face, my neck, my head, especially my hands where I held them up to protect my face. Thank God they did that, or they would end up looking like my hands. And, she managed to get to my bedside while I was at Jersey City Medical Center. Steve was still there. She got to meet Steve. And Steve went, they couldn't airlift me out because President Bush had grounded all the planes. So I had to wait there at the triage center in Jersey City Medical Center until about 6:15 when they were able to put me in an ambulance to get me over to St. Barnabas Burn Unit in Livingston, New Jersey. And there I spent about 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks in October there. Okay, we go ahead. So now all of a sudden 9/11 is kind of over, and we're starting to see publications of some of the stories. And someone comes up to me and says, you know, you're in the Chicken Soup for the Soul of America business. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, there's a story, twin savings at the Twin Towers. And it's really a story about Steve and not me. What it was written about by, who wrote the story of Steve coming to my rescue, etc. But it's called the Twin Savings at the Twin Towers because Steve had always maintained that by him sticking around to assist me, saved his life from sticking around. Obviously, Steve was the guy who was going to help people. I mean, he threw himself into the fray. And having known him for the last 23 years, he's definitely a soul who would do that, drop everything to help somebody else. But he always claimed that because I drew him away from the dust, the debris, all the other bad stuff, that I saved his life too. There we go. The next one, I think that's probably okay. So, for his efforts, the White House, signed by George Bush and Laura Bush, wrote a letter to Steve, and it says, we send you our beautiful thanks and the thanks of a grateful nation for your selfless efforts in responding to the tragic events of September 11th. Your actions in the midst of this national tragedy were truly heroic. You are risking your life to help Ken Summers, reflected the best of the American spirit. The many remarkable acts of courage, kindness, and generosity have touched and inspired our country. May God bless you and your family, and may God bless America. Sincerely, George Bush and Laura Bush. So that was sent to Steve, which he shared with me. Okay, we're good to go on. All right, so this presentation is going to backtrack a little bit so that you can know a few of the things. This fireboat was the John McKean. It was an old fireboat. It was built in 1950, about 1955, 54, 55. And this pulled up to the Hudson River Wall just as Steve and I were walking down this, we come out the next street over and we walked down here. And as soon as they pulled in, two firemen jumped off and set me down on the bench to try to triage me a little bit. So the interesting about this fireboat is that on the 3rd anniversary of 9/11, I gave a speech up at the Bayshore Middle School for about 400 or 500 kids that were sitting on red, white, and blue tarps all over the ball field up there. They had just dedicated a victory garden and a memorial garden. And not only was I there, but they also had a singer who was a member of their school choir, Morgan Bolton. His family is Frank Bolton, who owns the Bolton Center in Bayshore. And Morgan was asked to sing the song Hero, that Mariah Carey made famous, like that. And I was just awestruck by how poised this young lady was to get up there and sing, that she inspired me to start to speak. And this happened to be the first time I had spoken. And after the whole event was over, a gentleman walked up onto the dais, stretched out his hand, and he says, "Hi, you mentioned the fireboat John McKean in your speech." And I said, "Yes, I did." He says, "I want to introduce myself. My name is John McKean." And I kind of said, "How do you respond to this?" He says, "I want to let you know, my wife and I sing," and he was a Hibernian singer. They were all dressed up in their Hibernian green and yellow satins to sing at that ceremony. And he said, my wife and I both belong to the Hibernian singers. He said, the story behind the fireboat is in 1954, my father was one of the engineers on the fireboat that he was working on at the time. And they had a fire down in the engine room. And it took the lives of several firefighters that were on that boat, but his father, John McKean Sr., managed to save the lives of about 8 men on board through some of his actions. He himself survived, but when they went to rebuild a new fireboat, they built the John McKean in 1955 and named it after this man's father, who came up and greeted me on the dais. I had since, after that, years later, I joined the Hibernians, and I sang with this man's wife, Maureen, who was one of the founders of the Hibernian Festival Singers. Her husband had passed away within the years between the time I joined the Hibernian, but all based on that one boat. And then it was, apparently it's in a museum now. And, when they took this boat out of service, because it was not in service when it was on 9/11, they had already decommissioned it. They brought it in because it was available from the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And when they replaced it with the super pumper, the 343, named after the fireman. So you should ever see the 343. It's huge. It's like 10 times the size of that fireboat. Okay. All right. These were some of the news clippings. This came from the Star Ledger, which is New Jersey's daily newspaper. And that's my wife, silhouette in the front, and me in the bed, you know, having just recently had some surgeries where they did a lot of skin grafts, etc. It's been the story of my life for about 13 years of having to go in for skin grafts almost every year. This, I don't know if you guys saw this, but this was the newspaper clipping from full page from the Newsday. And I had some guy in a supermarket years later spot me in a supermarket line saying, "You're the luckiest unlucky guy." And I had thought my hair had grown back by then. But that's what Newsday wrote up. Okay, this was around Christmas time. This was the New York Post. I will get over it. I'll take that one with a grain of salt, but yes, I've for the most part gotten over it. It was a difficult journey. Both my wife and I, family, daughters. All right, let's go. All right, I got a letter too. I got a letter from Hillary Clinton. I was so sorry to learn from Bill Cunningham, the gentleman in the room here, today like that, because I had some bad news to pass on to Hillary of the serious injuries you sustained during the attack on the World Trade Center. I know that it must have been very difficult for you. You are fortunate to have Nadine, Kim, and Katie cheering you on. I will keep all of you in my thoughts and prayers. Hillary Rodham. Nice having a little mementos. Show your grandkids. Okay. Now this is West Side Highway. This is the Marriott Hotel. So when I started walking down, I walked from the Trade Center down along this side, begging people for help. I did not see a fire truck, a fireman, a police car, or anything in the 15 minutes or so it took me to be sitting down on the curb over here when the second plane came in. But what I did see, and it caused me all sorts of grief, was that a box of IBM, the 3-inch diskettes, the plastic ones, the little hard ones, had blown out of one of the upper floors of the building and landed on the ground in front of me. I didn't see it hit, but I had to walk through this pile, and it wasn't just a little box, it was thousands of discs. And they were on the ground, and they were covering the sidewalk, and I had everything I could do to stay upright trying to walk across them. It was like I'm being on moving ground during an earthquake. But that's what it looked like when everybody started to arrive. When the South Tower eventually fell, it took out this walkway. Okay. Now, this is the west side entrance to the North Tower. This is the portico that stands out, allowed the taxis to drive up underneath. The person who took this picture had indicated where some people had landed, which we didn't need to see, but it's there. And I needed these pictures in order to give me some perspective as to where I was. And it looks like I ended up somewhere out here right at the edge. And this is the revolving door was over here. So it threw me quite a ways. Also tossed one of my coworkers too, but she had this planter. They had these 8-foot diameter planters. There were about 6 or 7 of them in front of the thing. After the first bombing, they wanted to make sure nobody was going to drive a car into the trade centers. So they put these huge planters on there. And where I miraculously got blown past them, and they weren't that far apart, she managed to get blown into them and kind of messed up her leg quite a bit. So. And her husband, who was one of my co-workers, also was, they both worked at Blue Cross where I worked. He managed to get burned very badly on his back, protecting her from the fireball that hit me. Okay. This is, now if anybody has seen me around town, you know that one of my favorite things is I have that hat that I wear all the time, blue hat. And I wear it all the time because it has a pin that I love on it. And that pin is modeled after this framework right here from the South Tower that was still standing. And some hippie silversmith in Louisiana, in the bayou, took that picture There's another one that's even better than that one. Took that picture and made it into a silver pin. I have never seen another one anywhere. But I swore that I would continue to wear that pin every day possible that I can in honor of my good friend who died that day. And this is the round wall in the center. This is the Tobin Plaza. This is where you would normally walk in every day. Big round fountain right in the middle, and a steel wall which got moved down to Battery City Park and eventually moved back to a memorial that they put right next to where the Deutsche Bank building used to be. You had to go walk up top there, up on the top there. Okay, we move on. Marcy Borders. I'm sure most of you might have seen this picture. This is Marcy Borders. Marcy worked in some firm in one of the towers. I think it might have been the South Tower. And she had her picture taken when she was completely covered in this toxic dust. And it's so toxic to Marcy that she developed cancer within a year and was gone within a year and a half. She didn't suffer any injuries whatsoever, but just got covered in this dust. And so I honor her in this picture. I keep showing it. All right, you can move on past these. You don't have to see these. Okay, you don't need that. Okay, we'll go to this. Right, that's in my presentation, but I didn't expect we were going to have to check the presentation. This is my best friend at Blue Cross Blue Shield. His name is Winston Arthur Grant. Winston was a devout Christian. His wife had ALS, and he was from Trinidad. And he had been on a work program over in our data center, our backup data center over in Staten Island that kind of saved our butts after 9/11 because we had everything was backed up over there. We just flip a switch and we were backing on, and Winston was one of the guys working over on that project. He happened to come back to the World Trade Center that Tuesday morning. I saw him at like 7:15 when I walked into the building. We had a little chat, went about our business. And I thought, whatever happened to Winston? Where was he? Why did he perish? And finally somebody told me just a couple of years ago that they saw Winston helping a guy in a wheelchair in the lobby of the North Tower. And he never made it out. Okay, all right. This picture here is two things in this picture going on. One of them is a picture of a fireman, Mike Keogh. And he was walking up the stairs, passing all these people going down the stairs. And he gets to this landing right here, and the man who took the picture of him and the people going down the stairs, all of a sudden shocked Mike into thinking, what am I doing? What the hell am I going into this for? You know, he was carrying hoses and all sorts of stuff. And he turned around and ran back down the stairs. And some people, some of his own co-workers want to say that what a coward, all those people died and Mike didn't. But I got to tell you, what was going on that day, there were no cowards out there. They talk about first responders. I never saw a fireman at all the whole day. But I can tell you that my co-workers who were staying by people in wheelchairs, who were helping people down the stairs, were to me my real first responders, the first line of defense. It took a long time for any of the firemen to get up to the top floors where the severe injuries were, and some never did. But also in this picture was the first time I found Winston. That's Winston right here. And I had talked to his wife about it, and she agrees with me that she saw that picture, which is prominently displayed in the museum, telling the story about Mike Kehoe. Doesn't say anything about Winston, because I didn't know anything about Winston. But she agreed with me that that's Winston was. So I at least had a hope that Winston may have made it out, but obviously he didn't. All right, and I'm going to end with this story about this individual. Each trauma and tragedy always has a few people who want to profit on other people's expenses. Does anybody know who this woman is? Has anybody ever seen this story? Well, you saw me in the hospital in the Star-Ledger, and I had my hands out like this. That photographer, the woman who did that story for the Star-Ledger, got involved with this young lady, and I'll tell you about her. I had a good friend who passed away a couple of years ago from cancer, and he, shortly after 9/11, he emails me. He was still working at Blue Cross, and he says, "You have to meet this woman. Her name is Tanya Head. She's absolutely amazing. She has a story that you won't believe. It's just like you." And I've been involved with her lately, forming an organization called the Survivors Network to try to help the survivors. You know, 'cause a lot of people out there, we're not getting the treatment and the fire companies and the police were, and all the first responders were getting. They were on their own. I went into one session in New York City to meet with a support group, and that was the last time I ever went there because I wasn't getting support. I was actually told to be quiet. I needed to talk to somebody, and they told me, "You got to be quiet." So, whatever. So, but she was going to help people, and so Brendan, who passed away, and this young lady, Tanya Head, got together with a few other people, and they formed this network, this Survivors Network. And they provided psychological counseling for anybody who wanted it. They brought in professionals who all did this pro bono to try to get some of these people back on their feet again. There's a lot of them who became so agoraphobic they couldn't step out of the house anymore. So Brendan says, "Why don't you make a lunch date with her and you meet her and you guys can share your stories," stuff like that. So I emailed her and I said, "How would you like to meet for lunch?" And I told her who I was. She said Brendan had told her, and she said, "Okay, let's do that." So we picked a spot and time, and about a half an hour before we were supposed to meet for lunch, she called me and told me she wasn't going to be able to make it. That's strike one. Strike two was we made another appointment and had lunch an hour before this one. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it. So there was no strike three. Strike three was my daughter and I got invited to go into 20 Liberty Street, which is right by the Trade Center. And we were going to be introduced to the man who was selected to design the memorial, the 9/11 memorial in the city. So we went in there. Now, what I had learned about Tanya before I had gone in there is Tanya was severely injured. She burned her arm, she broke her leg, she did this, but she also was on the 78th floor of the South Tower, which is the sky lobby. That's where we would change elevators over. And a man who was dying passed his wedding ring on to Tanya, who was injured, to give to his wife. And a few other things that were just like, Well, I didn't question it. Brendan didn't question it. But I was starting to be a little suspicious why she keeps on changing these lunch dates at the end. So when we got to this meeting about the architect of the towers, Tanya was there. She was a superstar. We can go on to the next picture here. She was meeting with Pataki and our good pal Rudy Giuliani, and Tanya was taking everybody all around New York City, showing them where this happened, going to the hospitals, meeting with people, etc. Now, to her favor, she never took money from anybody. But she was deceiving everybody. She was not even in the country on 9/11. It turns out that Tanya Head's real name was Estevez. That was her name. Amelia Estevez, I think. She was from Barcelona, Spain. She came over here after 9/11. Her arm, that we all thought that everybody thought was burns, was actually an atrophied arm from a bicycle accident she had when she was 18 years old. Now you can see Tanya's probably 40, 45, something like that. And we went into this, when we went to this presentation, I got to meet Tanya. I knew I wasn't going to try to shake her atrophied hand, but we did kind of bang knuckles like that. And when we left her, my daughter Kate turns to me and says, "Those aren't burns. She didn't have burns, Dad." And I said, "Yeah, you noticed that, huh?" I said, "Those weren't burns. That was something else." And sure enough, not too far away from us was standing a New York Times reporter. And he caught on to, probably before we caught on, had been catching on to what Tanya was up to, and outed her. And not only did he out her in the New York Times, but he outed her to all the people that she was providing support to. I think the organization still exists, obviously, without Tanya. But she really had snookered a lot of people with the best intentions of trying to help, because she never took money. Had she taken money, I would have figured that she was some type of, con artist or something like that. She just had some type of mental disease that wanted to put her in the forefront of being a savior or being a hero or whatever it was. And not only did they make a book came out there, The Woman Who Wasn't There, which you saw the cover before, but there was also a video that came out. The book was written by the woman who came in and photographed me, did a story on me, and they also did a video on her. And it's interesting to watch. You can probably get it in the library. It's called The Woman Who Wasn't There. And it's an interesting story. And I think that, if you're on, I think we probably reached close to the end here. That's it?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's my story. It's been a long journey. Like I said, I had surgeries right up to 2014, not every year. Some of them more minor than others, some of them major. I learned a lot of things about burns. When I was injured, I had a watch right here, a big fossil watch. And when they took the watch off after they did the skin grafts, you could see where the watch had been, so the skin was fine. But now that same image of the line where the watch is now up here. Okay? And what that goes to show you is that burns migrate. They move down your arms. They move down the thing. And so what happens is it starts to fill in the spaces between your fingers and webs you. And so there's a procedure called web releasing that they had to do 2 or 3 times, I guess, over the course of maybe 2 times, which is the results of those quick pictures that you saw there. That was after they've done a web release. They have to take all the skin off your hand, redo all the tendons and everything like that. But and that was it. But change your life, yes, change your life. I used to be a piano player. Can't really play the piano much anymore. Can't hold a golf club. Can't hold a tennis racket. Haven't skied since 9/11. These are all things that I love. So my life changed, and we have to adjust to the changes. But sometimes it's a little bit fun. But I have a wonderful group like you guys who come here out of the goodness of your hearts to listen to this. Some of you may have heard it before, and others not. That's it.